Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take you through the workbook. And as Karen said, ask questions at any time. She's going to monitor for me so she can hold the questions at the end, or if she thinks it belongs right there, she'll pop it in for me. Read it out loud. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what we're talking about today is the second edition of the Executive Functioning Workbook. I'm not sure. I guess that would have been a good question, Karen. How many people saw the first book?
That would have been a good one.
Um, so one of the big things that we've changed here is this one has the subtitle, Putting the Pieces Together. In our first workbook, we really focused on executive functioning. But in this workbook, we've added in self-regulation and social emotional skills, mostly with the Oaklander model exercises. And the reason for this is our center has always been whole child based. And what we realized with the executive functioning workbook, the first one, the materials and tools are quite solid for teaching executive functioning, but it takes more than that for a student to change and use the tools.
Melissa, can you
Mhm.
speak up just a little bit?
No, turn my volume up. Does that help?
I think so. Yeah.
Is that better? Can people hear?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So, what's in the book? Basically, this new workbook is broken into three parts. There's an introduction that goes more into the theory. Oh, I think we have here. The introduction goes into the theory, imagining how to teach executive functioning with the new system that we've created here. A definition of the components of the program, and then a preview of the strategies. So the introduction is more general into the view that we have and this sort of the education you need to use them if you are unfamiliar with these terms. And then, so I already answered this actually. Why did we think we needed one? The reason that we decided to create it really was to figure out how to get students involved in using the tools. What we found at the center is that just giving the worksheets or giving the here's how you do it was not enough. And that's where the partnership between Karen and I really, I think, excelled for our center, was bringing in the whole, what is the student feeling? How are we going to get them engaged in what's going on? And so that's the part that we really wanted to add to this new workbook. And so within that, for those who are unfamiliar with these terms, the executive functioning is the umbrella term that sort of the whole management of the brain, the planning, organization, and follow through on a task. Did I just go backwards? I think I did. Okay, there we go. Self-regulation is being aware of one's thoughts and feelings so that you can control your actions. And this is important in setting goals, controlling the actions and ignoring the distractions. So this self-regulation is key for executive functioning, because if we give you the tools, the checklist, but you're going to be distracted all over the place and give up before you're done, the worksheet does nothing. And then the social emotional abilities is understanding and connecting to other, reading the cues, monitoring and assessing how you're doing along the way. So you can see how the self-regulation and social emotional skills help a student to then do the executive functioning skills. So to teach executive functioning, a student really needs to be looked at holistically. So the workbook, just so you know, is over 200 pages long. So today is going to be a quick overview of the beginning chapters, and we'll spend a little more time with the workbook activities and going through the flow of the program. So the components of executive functioning, as you can see, there's quite a few. You have inhibition, shifting, emotional control, monitoring, organizing materials, working memory, time management, planning, and initiation. So these are all skills students need to get their work done in a manageable way. And then self-regulation. And just so you know, it's hard to separate all these things. Everything affects everything. But in the components of self-regulation, you have cognition, which is basically thinking and acquiring knowledge. You have metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. And this is where we're going to really focus in our program, is on the metacognitive part, so that they're controlling their thinking skills. And then motivation is why we're willing to do something. And that's what we want to develop as well with them as they go through the program. I'm going to pass the Oaklander model portion over to Karen, as she is the expert in this field. And so we use the Oaklander model for all the self-awareness exercises to help build the self-regulation and social emotional skills. And so, Karen, I can pass this to you.
Sure. So this is so fancy because I don't do slides this way. This is amazing. So the first thing is to be present. And we have a lot of things on our mind. So all of us have had a morning, had a day, and we might be preoccupied. And then we are called upon to be present with the child that we're working with. And so it often needs to be, I know, to sort of think about, well, what's on my mind and what do I need to leave outside the session so I can be present. So it's an active sort of decision to make, because we know that children can sense if we're present or we're not. And that gives us the opportunity to actually connect with who they are and how they are showing up for the session. And we keep in mind that we meet them often as people who are struggling with, and that's why we're meeting them. And we keep in mind where they could go as a result of their work with us. So we're sort of holding both. And then that leads to confirmation of who they are now and where they're going. And we would always say in our center, where do you see them? Get an image. We would often at the beginning of every school year have everyone take their caseload and say, what's your image of where you see them when they're finished sessions with you? Keep that in mind, however they show up. That's confirmation. And then we're authentic and honest. And so we also don't deny whatever the situation is. Here's what I know that happened this week. You had a hard time in your schoolwork. I heard from a few sources that you didn't do well on a test, you didn't turn in your assignments, you lost this. I know about this. And at the same time, we're authentic and communicate all the wins that happened, and we make sure to do that. And so we're not pretending either way. And so that's genuine and full communication. And all this is, those of you who know about the Oaklander model, the I-thou relationship, we are always respectful, and we honor how they are, their rhythm, how much they can do. We're there for that. So that's the atmosphere of respect.
Thank you. So We went more into detail on this one because I think this Oaklander model is the key difference between our new workbook, the second edition, and the first one. In adding in the Oaklander model, we really take the whole executive functioning teaching process to another level that many teachers are unfamiliar with, but we've tried to make it extremely simple to integrate into a session or a classroom with the activities that are in the workbook. So basically, the whole workbook, the strategies that we're using are metacognitive prompts and the Oaklander model. The metacognitive prompts facilitate the executive functioning skills, while the Oaklander model activities facilitate the social emotional self-regulation skills that students need to be able to follow the metacognitive prompts. We need both of them. It's not one step. Well, I think the Oaklander model does a whole lot of things where the metacognitive prompts are very geared towards the getting your work done and the executive functioning skills of following through on task, breaking it down. Okay, so that takes you through the introduction, and then we have the instructor guide, which is really geared towards how to structure the sessions. And a lot of this is taken from 30 years of having a learning center working with children with learning challenges and how we learn to structure sessions to be successful. And the number one thing we really know it is about having the relationship and building the trust first, and then teaching the tools and the things that will get them towards success second. And so even though I have the metacognitive prompts first, number one is really the Oaklander model of doing this. So in the instructor guide, it details the executive functioning metacognitive prompts that we use to structure the program. It then also summarizes the Oaklander model and how to integrate it into your sessions. And then finally, it has preparing the sessions for the student and running those sessions. So the metacognitive strategy that we have used to structure this workbook is stop and imagine, think and plan, do and review, check and turn in. And this stop, think, plan, well, we changed it in the other book. It was stop, think, plan, do. But what we realized is think and plan really go together. So in this book, it's stop and imagine, think, plan, do, and then check is a critical term for many students with executive functioning issues because they need to check it and turn it in. How many times have you heard the story with an executive functioning student that did the work and it was in the bottom of their backpack or at their desk, or they never turned it in electronically? So check and turn in is a critical step to executive functioning. And what we did with this strategy that we used for years at the center is we used it to structure the units in the workbook. So this starts with Unit 2 because that is where we start with the prompts. Unit 1, as you'll see when we get to the workbook, has to do with the quiz and gathering your information about the student. So you can structure your program from Unit 1. Unit 2, you're starting to use the prompts. So with the stop and imagine, basically for many students with executive functioning, stop is the hardest part of the program. Many students just jump right in. They want to be done. So they think the faster they start, the faster they're done, and the whole middle process is missed. And we have discovered for many students, if you can get them to stop, take a moment and imagine what they need to do and have a clear picture of where they're going with it and organizing themselves before they start. So the stop and imagine is sort of stop and imagine, I'm an organized person that's going to finish this, and this is what it looks like. Unit 3 is the think and plan. And this is where we go with planners, long-term planning, programs, and checklists. Unit 4 is the do and review. And this is where the student actually is getting to work. They're planning their nightly. And of course, each one of these units builds on each other. So you're going to use your stop and imagine while you're thinking and planning. You're going to use think and plan while you're doing and reviewing. So they're not separated, but they do have a flow to them. And then unit 5 is check and turn in. So this is the process that we want a student with strong executive functioning skills to be able to go through whenever they're doing their work. And so once you get those metacognitive processes down and you understand them in the units, each unit has the projective processes. And I'm going to again pass this over to Karen to go through the Oaklander model of the projective process to build self-awareness.
Okay. So the first thing is we're going to do an experience actually just to have you practice with this. But one of the exercises we have in the book is there's an executive function called um, initiation. So there's a lot of students who have a hard time getting started. And so we have them imagine, in this case, we move from the procrastinator to the initiator, for example. So the part that has a hard time getting started. So we say, imagine the procrastinator. And then what would it look like? And then in the sensory experience would be to make it or choose a puppet that goes with it. What does it look like for you? And then if they're open to this, they would play the part of the puppet or the drawing that they made of this part of themselves. They may not want to, and that's okay. We just offer the whole range to sort of really have them connect to this part of themselves because it's happening for them every single day, often or very regularly. And then as they were this part, the puppet, the drawing, whatever it was, does it make sense that you picked this three-headed dragon who was the procrastinator for you? And if so, that part 5 is extended. So what would we do with that part? And one way, and we're going to be doing this later, is to imagine the polarity, which is, well, if you have a procrastinator, if you understand polarities, we also have an initiator. We have a part of us that knows how to get started. You may not be as in touch with that part, but it's there. And what would that look like? And then you go through that. And then you can talk about the differences.
Thank you. So here's just an example of some of the exercises that are within the workbook. So there's many for each section, but I just thought fun to look at some of the titles. So your question is, how do you begin? So this is the instructor manual. And the very first thing you're doing is get to know your student. Then you're going to plan your strategy. And there's sort of 2 ways to go through the program. Well, there's a zillion ways to go through the program because you're going to individualize it for your student, but 2 main sections. One is you can go through by prompt. You can pick which one of these prompts does your student really need to start with, or you can choose to go through by the executive functioning skill, and you can see what chapters you would find those exercises in. And so what you can do is you'll see as we go through, there's a lot of exercises for each of the skills within the chapters. So it might be you're going to start with the do and think and plan. I always recommend you start with stop and imagine because I think any student with executive functioning skills needs stop and imagine, but maybe not the student you're looking at. So you pick where you're going to start with them. You want to pick where you're going to have the quickest impact because you want them to have success sooner than later. So wherever their greatest weakness is, that's where you want to start. And then you can go back and get the other sections later. But it's important for them to see results as soon as they can. And so that's where if they're really having trouble with doing and reviewing, I wouldn't start on these 2. I would jump right in. Let's figure out how to get this work done. And then as you're doing that, you can see, hey, what if we stop and imagine before we do that? Let's have you take a moment and do this. So in other words, you're in control of the workbook. You're going to customize it to your student. It's not a check off everything that you did everything. Not every student needs every part or every activity. So that's where you really are the master of it, and it can shift and change as the student changes, as you get to know them more, as other challenges come up. So that's a key component. And then in preparing the sessions, I don't know how many of you work with students directly, but creating a good treatment plan can really help you get through the sessions more smoothly. Because we all know there are bumps in the road along the way. And so really having a good treatment plan, blending the Oaklander model and the executive functioning training in the workbook, I think is really critical. So you're looking at both those prompts of their executive functioning strengths and weaknesses, but you're also looking at those skills across the top of where are they that they need more self-awareness of why these skills are not being built. And then once you really have a good overview of them, you've assessed them well, then you can set the goals to be very specific. We want specific goals because we want to have them sort of measurable so we can say, here, this is where you had trouble. Now look how you are doing this. So the smaller the goal and the more specific it is, the better you can point out the change as it happens. And then the goals can change along the way. And I know we say set by the parent, the teacher, and the student, but also you, because as the person teaching this, you want to set realistic goals. And oftentimes the parent just comes in and their hands are thrown up. This kid's a mess and they're not turning anything in. And the teacher is saying this. And the student, of course, comes in with a whole nother view. So you're the one that says, okay, and gives realistic expectations to the parent, the teacher, and the student as well as you set these goals so that, you're not going to have them turning in all their appointments, all their assignments by next week. That's not a realistic goal for most students with executive functioning unless you're doing the work for them. And that is not our goal here. So we want to remind the parents and the teacher and the student that you're teaching them a process that they integrate within themselves that they can then follow independently. And therefore, they need enough leash to have errors and forget again and go through the process over and over until they realize, oh, this process actually works. And then they get a little excited. And then you have the motivation for them to then engage more with the task. So these specific goals based on a true assessment of what you're dealing with are going to be critical for getting through the program successfully. So when you're looking at this assessment of the student, you're looking at both their contact skills and their learning profile. So many times parents will come in and they're only looking at the learning profile. Here, I had this report done. Here's where they are academically. Here's their IQ. There's this. But don't forget the contact skills, which go with the Oaklander model and with the self-awareness of who is this child and how are they processing the world around them. Because basically what school is taking in all the information from all the classes and the work they have to do and understanding what that is and how to achieve a goal towards it. So there's two parts to your assessment. And many times the parents will come in and give you the learning profile, but the contact skills are going to be more up to you to assess. So during the sessions, and this is again, we're talking here about what's going to work for the executive functioning program, but these are what we've learned about any successful session teaching a child with learning challenges. And an executive functioning weakness is a learning challenge. It's also a life challenge because these skills go towards everything they do. So when you're looking at planning your session and starting your session, you're going to remind yourself why you are doing executive functioning and keeping the big picture of the student in mind. And what that, while you're doing that, you're going to share the end goal. Why are we doing this? What are we aiming towards here? And keeping that in sight as they go, because students can forget everything. They're in the moment and they're forgetting they're here to get to the point where they can turn in their work. They have less stress. That can reduce their anxiety. They can relax more. You're going to track how their things are going in school as well as in sessions. So it's very helpful to have communication with the schools or the teachers, depending on the grade level of the student, if possible, to see how they're doing. Because we have often found that students with executive functioning issues are not necessarily reliable narrators about what needs to be done or how they're doing. And so they can tell you they're doing great, and then the parent sends a note saying he hasn't turned in his work for 3 weeks. So you want that outside validation of what's happening in school so you can address it with the student. And they might want to ignore it, but that's not in their best interest in the long run to help them learn executive functioning skills. And again, one of the things, and I said this before, is to take the baby steps. Nothing succeeds like success. So if there's something they can do today that they couldn't do yesterday, we really want to set it up so that happens, so you can celebrate it and they can feel good. Look at me. I'm doing something here. I'm mastering this. And I don't care how little it is. It's just great to say, yay, look at that. And so you want to, review as you start. Look at this. Look how you did that. I understand that didn't go great this week, but look at this that did, because they really can become overwhelmed with what they have to do. That's one of a trait that many students with executive functioning have, is overwhelm. So those little victories sort of break that overwhelm down, that something is happening here. I can do something. I can do this. So really want to stress that, because executive functioning is such a big overview of life for them, because it's usually not just at school that they're having issues. They're also at home, not doing everything that needs to be done, or, other places that it impacts. And then you want to be monitoring their behavior within the sessions and over the sessions. So take time to praise what's going better, and also take time to discuss what's not going well. So both of these are equally important in your sessions. We don't want to ignore behavior at all. And we want to remember that positive behavior is just as valid as negative behavior, and not ignore either of them. Explain and re-explain the student's profile when needed. That's one of the reasons you're going to spend time up front getting a good overview of them, so that you can remind them. And I think one of the key parts, it's not necessarily about using a label like you're this. It's about, here's the areas you're strong in, so we don't have to focus so much on that. But here's the areas you're weak in, and this is where you need to slow down and go through these skills and steps that are going to help you through the tough areas. And when you break down their learning profile and everything, like you'll see we'll do later in the workbook, that you can then, they can realize it's not everywhere that's a mess. There are certain areas that they're actually good in and certain areas that they're not. And that's okay, because you're there to help them. And that's the whole point of learning. And then you want to envision your students' potential. So you're working on their weaknesses, but you want to visualize how they're going to be when they're done with you. Because as Karen used to say, we're one of the only businesses that we want people to outgrow us. It's like, we want them to be done. So what does this student look like when you get to say, you've graduated, you've mastered this, I don't need to see you anymore, you got it? What will they look like to you? And that's something you want to hold in your mind, especially when they're challenging you in showing them or being resistant. You want to see them as a non-resistant, happily learning student that gets it. So, and that's the whole purpose of the workbook and the sessions that you're doing, is to get them to that end goal. And that takes us to the workbook. So, as I mentioned before, there are 6 units. Well, I think I didn't talk about the recess, but the first unit is doing the executive functionnaire and doing your goal setting. Then we start with our first prompt: stop and imagine, think and plan, do review, check and turn in. And basically we use these over and over and over and over. We want them to be internalized with these prompts. Whenever I sit down to do something, I go through these steps. And then Unit 6 is reassess. How have you done through this program? So with Unit 1, the questionnaire and goal setting, you start with the quiz. Well, probably in your intake, you're going to get the academic, any testing, you're going to talk to the student, parent, you're going to get their whole background. And so you have that before you start your first session. In your first session, or oftentimes we have the students take the quiz before they come into their first session and they bring the results with them. Either way is fine. And with the quiz, when you go look at the website, you'll see, if those of you that haven't taken the quiz, I think we gave you the link, and it's great if you took it before today and you know the process. But you will have seen there's a student quiz, an adult quiz, a student quiz, teacher quiz, parent quiz, and adult quiz. And it's very interesting when you have the student, the parent, and the teacher all take the quiz, because you can see the different perspectives. How does the parent see the student? How does the teacher see the student? And how does the student see themselves? And whether that's all similar or totally different. And that gives you a lot of information about what's going on with this student. And then in the workbook, we have a worksheet where you take the students' scores and put them in. And if you have multiple scores, if you have the teacher, the parent, and the student, you could create little columns here and put them in. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Karen, who is going to do a sort of analysis of how to interpret the scores when you get them. Karen, do you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Sure. So did anyone take the quiz? Oh, Bethany, this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. So, does anyone want or mind sharing their quiz that they took? Did anyone take it, and would you mind sharing it? And I'll sort of go through how we would integrate this quiz feedback. And that's a perfect question for right now.
Did someone say they'd be willing to share? Okay, Alana. Hi, Alana.
Hey, I'm happy to share. Nice to see you.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Do you want me to share the screen of it, or do you want me to just tell
yeah,
you?
do you mind?
No, let me grab it. Just take 1 second.
And Catherine, I'm sorry that was your experience. If you want, we can schedule a meeting and I can go through it with you. Here's what I will say about this quiz. We've had it up on our website for 20 years, would you say? And we have about 45,000 people who have gone through it, which is pretty amazing. A lot of people, is there a go back option? I have to look at it.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think you have to start again.
Yeah.
Anyway, so some teachers will, or college professors will use it for their class before and after their class and incorporate some concepts of executive functioning so that they can measure based on the content that they delivered in their class, and then some of these skills that they tried to also instill. Did they make an impression? And so it's been widely used. Okay, so
It has been widely used,
yeah.
but I'm just going to say one of the things that's very important, and I try to make that clear in the website, is that this is not a measurable tool in the way that any other the words are going out of my mind now, but its point is this is a self-report. So there's no, a 3 for one student could mean something totally different than a 3 for another student. So the whole point of this is the highs and lows, not the individual scores. So you can't compare one person's scores to another necessarily. Only are their strengths, are their highs and lows the same? Are there 3 points between these two things, or 1 point? Not what the numbers themselves are. Because some people judge themselves very harshly, and some people do, are kinder to themselves. So it is really about the difference in the scores, not what the actual numbers are.
So it's measurable, it's not standardized.
That's the word.
So, and yet it's so widely used, theoretically, we could have, there's very few standardized measures that have as much data as we actually have. We just haven't done it. Anyway, so Alana, thank you for sharing this. And as Melissa said, what we care about is the distribution across the scores more than the actual numbers. And these scores range from 1 to 4. So theoretically, what we would notice is a 2 or 3 point difference. That's as far of a difference that we can get. And we overall view this as mostly a very strong executive functioning set of skills. So we should first take an overview snapshot of this. And so and then it's our view, we look at it, but then what's most important is, in this case, what you think about it, Alana. Would you say that generally this is a strong set of skills for you?
Yes. I also think, like, depending on when I took this and what I
Yeah.
was feeling also had an impact on it.
Makes sense, for sure. Sometimes we're feeling a little stronger in all our frontal lobe functions.
Mhm.
And then depending on life, we might feel a little less so. Oh, good. Let's see. Are they all, does it start with working memory and end with shifting?
Yeah,
It
I
does.
just moved
Yeah.
it up.
Okay, good. Okay. So what we would just eyeball is the highs and the lows and the consistency. Okay. So the highs are, that you are organized, and organizing materials means you can find what you need when you need it. That's sort of what we take from a high score in that regard. And confirm or deny, feel free.
Yeah, no, yes, I would agree.
Okay, great. And then planning, you can see something that needs to get done and not be overwhelmed by the series of steps that it takes. A lot of people just see that as one thing to do and they get overwhelmed. And theoretically, the way you endorse this item, you can break it down and you can plan tasks.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
Time management is a sense of time. So if I was going somewhere and I was speaking to my friend and I was going to be early. I was talking to her on the way. And she knew I had another errand to run. And she said, "Why don't you just stop there first?" Because she knew and I said, "See, I have a sense of time. I knew that if I did that first thing, then not only wasn't I going to be early for this other thing, I was going to be late." And I know this friend a long time. This is her. This is why she's late to things. And so you have a sense about that. You know what 5 minutes is, and you know what an hour is, and what's possible in that time.
Yes. I mean, most of the time. I don't know. I can't believe it's a strength, but yes.
Most of the time we'll take most of the time. And then monitoring means that whatever is expected of you, and it could be high stakes or low stakes, you have a sense of what that is. And if for some reason it didn't conform to those expectations, you're not surprised. That monitoring.
Yes.
Making sense so far. Okay, good.
Yes.
And by the way, I know we're here with a group, so you could for sure tell me that we missed something. Because we're
Oh,
open.
but I will tell you that Melissa taught me most of these things many, many years ago. So they're still working.
Well, we'll just say that it's fun to see you. It's
Thank
really
you.
fun to see you,
Now I just
honestly.
need to teach this to my own children.
Well, yeah. But well, you're not just, you know, that we teach by modeling, by the way.
I know. I try.
Well, chances are, at least some of it's successful based on who you are, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Okay. So then the threes we would consider relative strengths.
Hmm.
And still strengths for sure. And they're only relative strengths because we have those fours there, right? So
Yeah.
you can hold things in your mind while you're working with them. Um, you're able to get started. I talk about the initiator versus the procrastinator. You're in touch with that part of you that can get started.
Hmm.
And Melissa has a whole book on flexible thinking, and a lot of it centers around this shifting to new tasks that you can make that change from one to the next.
Yes. I think that is, I know it says it's a relative strength, but I think it's one that is a continual work in progress as I'm working on one project for work and then I have to shift to another the next hour and then come back to it. So
Yeah,
that can be challenging.
sure. Sure. Being a working parent is an exercise in shifting, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say a working parent and I'm in school.
Oh my
It's a
gosh.
lot. So that's why I'm not surprised at the emotional one at this point and having taken it this morning.
Aha. Okay. So whatever you feel like sharing about that, that's the only thing that is at all like
Sure.
the weaker spots.
Well, I would say I had to submit something to the state last night. And so as much as I planned to have it done by Tuesday, it wasn't. And I think the emotional piece, and the way I responded was probably, to procrastinate more once it didn't get done, right? Like, and not manage my time well, but knowing that I would get it done no matter what. It was still a stressful situation.
Sure. Sure. And what you helped us sort of see and how you just responded is how they're related to each other, right? Because if we don't manage our time well and we're late to something, for example, it may be stressful. How we and so that affects our emotions. If we can't find what we need as far as organizing materials, then also that can affect our emotional control. And so that can vary, as you're saying, based on maybe the last thing that happened, as you're saying, Alana.
Yes, I think that that's when I'm able to pinpoint, looking at these categories, I'm able to pinpoint what I didn't do well, which
Yeah,
caused the emotional control piece.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so appreciate you being willing to share this and to respond to Bethany's question. So what we do is in this case, we had Alana who well, we happen to know her. So adults are often really good reporters of how they're doing. So if they take this quiz, often we're going to say they know themselves. Children are often not as good reporters. They can either be really hard on themselves and everything's a problem, or they can be fine and everything, even though they're referred to us because there's some definite struggles going on. So that's why Melissa and I put the self-report, the parent report, the teacher report. So what we can do is have these comparison, contrasting views on the same student, just to help with some of the perspective taking. The children just developmentally or because of their sense of self aren't ready to absorb yet. So that is among the first steps where we review those three set of results. And from there, that's part of a treatment plan, so that we go to work on some of the things that Melissa started to talk about and what we've outlined in our book here and many other ways to work on this. But first, what we're having is that they understand why we're doing what we're doing. There's this concept of demystification that was cited by Mel Levine, who was an expert in this area. And he said, we should not be more of an expert on children than they are about themselves. So in words that they can understand, we explain their profile and then come to a plan that their parents, and if the teachers are involved or the school psychs involved, that's fantastic. We always worked with as much of a team as would participate.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that we should go to one of the experiences, Melissa, that we
Okay.
started with.
All right. So we will quickly go through. There's the interview questions, then you set goals. Basically, we talked about the Oaklander and the work things. The Oaklander things are meant to be fun. The worksheets break things down. In the Stop and Imagine, here's a list of all the skills. And then the first exercise we're going to do here is an exercise to clear your mind. And Karen's going to take you through using the whiteboard app that she has. And here is the QR code for it or the link if you want to.
Oh, don't use that QR code. Sorry.
Oh.
This one is the mindful draw. So it's go to either playtherapyapps.com. Because we're doing the scribble here.
Right.
Or mindfuldraw.com. And that'll take you. We were thinking to do a gallery, but that's later. Whoops, that was not the right link. Sorry, everybody.
So playtherapyapps.com.
Yeah, playtherapyapps.com, mindfuldraw.com. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to share. If you stop sharing, I'm going to show you the thank you. I'm going to show you how it works. Some of you have used it. So this activity, do you want to say what it does, Melissa? This clear your mind.
So basically, what the clear your mind is for is at the beginning of a session when a student comes in sort of dysregulated. This is a very quick way to just let them scribble it out and clear their mind so they can be ready to work. So it's one of the simplest exercises in the workbook, and it's very effective. And
Exactly.
you can just do it with pencil and paper, or you can use the app or anything else you have around.
That's right. So I happen to have this as an option. And so this is some of you know this app and know about the Buddha board, which is painting on a screen and it disappears after a time. And so the idea is we have something on our minds. The kids come in, as Melissa said, and you just draw it any way you want. Just
that feels great.
it feels great. And then you have them take a breath. And just as it's clearing off the screen, it can clear off their mind. So you can do it on your device if you want, just to see what it's like. And those of you who haven't seen it, there's actually Laura here said, well, why don't you have a color palette? So we did add that. This is based on this Zen idea of impermanence. I don't know how Zen it is, but I think Laura's idea was perfect. And then you can set the fade, and you can have it fade shorter or longer. You can also save it if some people get nervous watching their image fade. So you can, and there's sounds also. But for purposes of this activity, take out a marker and draw on a paper, or you can have them use this. Okay. So we have one more thing that we can do, which is an experience if you're still with us. Just so you get the idea of how this can work, whatever you think, Melissa, we can go right to one more experience.
Sure.
Okay.
So, I'm going to fly through until we get to the other experience so you can see it. So basically, there's a lot of worksheets. Every chapter has worksheets and Oaklander activities in them. So you can see in the do and review. So this is the other one we're going to do, which is in chapter 4, the do and review chapter. And these are the actual worksheets in the book. So you can see it has the materials, the instructions, and then the steps to follow. And Karen's going to take you through this one.
Okay. Just so you get an idea. So a lot of times there's this very negative association with people who have a hard time getting started. They themselves feel badly that they are procrastinating getting their work done, and well-meaning people around them and them say, oh, we're going to be done with our assignments or these tasks that we need to do by this time. And this time passes, it's dinner, and they haven't done a thing. And it casts a negative pall upon the household, right? And certainly we know that the child, the teen, does not feel good about themselves. So the purpose of doing this in a playful manner, let's say with puppets, if I could find it, is to make this still address it, but in a fun and playful way. And a lot of executive functioning, study skills is very left-brained. Fill out this worksheet. Let's talk this through. And we have often the whole creative, imaginative, intuitive side, which can be so helpful. Maybe the stronger part of the skill set for a child, and we haven't accessed it unless we do something like this. So if you've gone to playtherapyapps.com, the idea here is for you to think about, let's say, the procrastinator and the initiator, right? And so what we're going to invite you to do and work together, if you don't mind, in breakout rooms, just a few minutes, and then we'll be closing our meeting for today. This will be the last thing, but we wanted you to just have the experience and see what you think. So let's say, does anyone want to, particularly those of you who know the puppets I have here, does anyone want to identify their procrastinator for me? I could do it, but anyone want to?
I can do it.
Thanks, Sveta. Which one?
Go up, up, a little bit more. Yeah, this one, the dog, or yeah.
Okay, so this dog is your procrastinator, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what Sveta's going to do in a breakout room is say, I am picking this as this procrastinator because, and you're just going to say a few words about it and why this sort of make sense for you. And again, how we can talk about these parts of ourselves that maybe bother us, but here we have this sort of funny puppet. And so as we know, as I talked about before, and what we have in the book here is polarities exist, we just might not be in touch with them. And so what's your initiator? Which puppet goes with that idea of getting started?
The bee.
Okay. Oh no, this is not the bee. I do this all the time. Okay. And those of you who don't know about this, these have a little teeny bit of imagination, of animation. So it can speak and jump. And the idea is that both of these, Melissa, you mentioned this, it's not about negative or positive in terms of judgment. It is, these are all parts of us, and we just want to get in touch with it. So you flip this over and you select both of them, they can actually hug. And that's the idea, which is we have these parts, and we can come to terms with both of them, and that's sort of our goal with the kids. So Sveta, thank you. You picked the procrastinator, the initiator, and what I would invite you to do is to just for a few minutes say, this is why I picked this one, this is why I picked this one, and here's how they might come together. I might accept both parts, whatever you feel like saying. This might be new to some of you, and not to others. So, and that's just like 5 minutes each. We'll bring you back in 10 minutes, just so you see how we do this. I am. Okay. So what I'm hoping is, okay, hold on. Okay, so there is just making sure there's someone who knows about this with someone where this might be new. Okay. Melissa, you're going to get an invitation, but you don't need to join. Okay, so go ahead and join. We'll tell you when you're halfway. Just a quick explanation of both. So, how was it?
That was fun. Laura taught me a lot. She has a lot of experience with this app, so it was fun.
Yeah, good.
For
Well,
me, it was also great. I just, Sveta did such a good job. I felt like on a spa treatment for my procrastinator.
See, that's what we want to feel, because usually we put our procrastinator in another place that isn't a spa, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thanks to those of you where this is new for being game to do this. And we want to take our last few minutes for any questions. There was one about resistance. Is the person who asked that question still here? You,
Yeah.
Jen.
Hi.
Hi. So
Hi.
I'm going to take that quickly, and then I defer to others just because I spend a lot of time on resistance. So one of the things that, but Melissa knows about this too. We are, well, you know about this idea that when children come in to see an educator, a therapist, someone who does both, right? We are often pushing on the areas that are the hardest for them to deal with. And so one of the things that Violet Oaklander, my mentor, said is we expect and respect resistance. Like, yeah, of course they don't want to deal with this or talk about this. That's painful often. And so that's where the relationship between ourselves and the child, the teen, is so important. And where we have agreed upon goals. So that, and we start, as Melissa talked about, with baby steps, so that they don't think that they have to be someone they're not. Just themselves, and we will start with wherever they are and build from there. And that takes trust and time and skill and practice and all those things.
So self-disclosure, I'm actually asking about my 12-year-old son. He's extremely resistant, and I just got him a tutor for EF, but is so resistant. And this is years of resistance, but now, and it makes sense developmentally, middle school, doesn't want to utilize his 504, will not, doesn't want to be pulled out during school time. So we don't, we've been very crafty about things. But I feel a bit helpless, and side piece, I'm an LMFT, but I know he's my kid, my client. And so I'm just kind of trying to be patient, but I'm just seeing like with the grades and the, everything about EF, it's like hit check mark on everything.
Uh-huh. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Any comment you want to make, Melissa?
I think that's very common. We hear that a lot. That is usually where we start. And that's why I love the new EF book with the Oaklander exercises, because I think just pushing the worksheets at them is just like more work. Where the Oaklander exercises that are fun and playful, like what you just did with the initiator, open them up that they can change, and it doesn't have to be hard. And then you can slip in some of the things that are going to start making sense. Like that's where the stop and imagine really comes in as the starting point. Imagine that this wasn't so hard for you. Imagine that you could look at your homework and just make a plan. And that's also where really the time management section of the book comes in, because mostly these kids they are underestimating their time to take. So starting to play with what's their sense of time, and getting realistic. So it's sort of like you have to work around the issue to get through the resistance, and to have them start making little changes along the way before the big things start changing. But really with an EF coach, getting all the planning, I mean, it's like a little bit from each of the chapters, honestly, because you need to have the homework plan, but you need to get them to follow it. So there's both steps. So the more playful it can be, the better it's going to be.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Catherine.
Yeah, I'm looking at it for myself. So, I'm under a lot of stress, and that's really shot my EF to hell, basically. And so it's quite interesting for me doing it. When I tried, I just kept messing up the actual thing, because you can't go back, because you've got to start again. I'm like, I'm done with starting over. Sorry. So that'd be my recommendation to you. Have a back button, for the love of God. But what I'm doing to start, before I could even do any worksheets, I'm thinking I use Trampoline, which we use a lot with autistic spectrum folks on the autistic spectrum, just to kind of regulate the synaptic transmission that is affected by the cortisol release, and just relax and feel playful in my body, feel looseness. I'm really rubbish at it. I've done it for 10 years, but it makes me feel happy. Then I can maybe get a little bit grasp of a bit of executive function on something. And I just wondered, where do you choose where to start in which of those areas? Or are you just like looking at the executive function categories and going, sort of looking at it together and just going, all right, there we are. Shining a light on it that's benevolent rather than judgmental. And is that a starting point? Because I'm not quite sure. I felt really overwhelmed by the range of questions. Thinking, how is that for a kid? I just wonder if it was paper, I'd rip it up by then. I'm the sort of person that rips up the rating scales in a counselling session or throws them at the person. And I had a great therapist who ripped them up for me in advance. I love that.
Well,
I love that
that's
man.
real. Yeah. So, I mean, we start with where they are, and our job is not to frustrate anyone and not you with our quiz. It's
Oh, I
certainly,
love the questions, but like, yeah, I'm like, oh, come on.
it's certainly not our intention. And if someone needs to have an anger or an aggressive energy thing of ripping paper, we're there for that, if need be, for sure. And certainly benevolent and not judgmental is our whole intention. Absolutely.
But what are you doing when you get all those ratings? Is it more for you, or is it something that you regard together,
We
saying, oh,
share it with them. We share it with them.
yeah.
And sometimes it's parts at a time, just depending on their tolerance.
So we did just ask them, like, which of these would be the one you'd like to start with? I mean, that would be what I'd tend to do myself. Is that where you would go with that, or is it something different?
We definitely give a range of choices and where to start. Usually it's not nothing, but sure, they could pick the category. We're starting somewhere. It's fairly directive when we do this work. But sure, if they want to start somewhere, anywhere, because they all affect each other. That's what Melissa was describing earlier.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah. And we do have it available for download. We just worked that out. Because I know shipping to Copenhagen is a big deal, is not a small thing. So, yeah.
So the download is not going to be broad for anyone, but if you would like one, Karen can give the link and you can buy it from our website, but it's a hidden page, so only those who can use the download.
I would appreciate it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. Anything else?
I would say something like I took the test and I received all of my qualifications were 4, all of them. It was like, okay. And Karen was amazed. Amazed is the word?
Yeah, I did say that. Not because I
yeah.
that's amazing. I'm amazed. Like, that's amazing. That kind of, yeah.
Yeah, surprised for that.
Not surprised.
No, not surprised. And I understand it better right now. And also, I have do this test with children, with 3 children right now. It happens are my clients, and I have been doing the progress, following them during the sessions after they know, because I show them this is this and this is that, and yeah, just like you described for us. So this has been very helpful. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for already using it. And reporting back. I appreciate it. Anything else before we close? This isn't your only chance. If you get this and you start using it, or you use the quiz, you can email us, and we'd love to hear how it's working out.
Are the emails readily available?
You mean how to email us?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
email are we using?
You can do info@knmcenter.com and we
Okay.
can get the download link for you. I also want to say, Monica, I see you in the chat that you got 2s and 3s.
Yeah.
Do remember that it's self-assessment. So your 3 could be the same as Lara's 4.
Ah,
It doesn't, that's one of the things that the hardest to get people off of. Because
right.
they, this kid had all 2s and this kid had all 7s or something. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is, does he have, and if it's all 7s and all 2s, it's unusual to have all the same. So usually
Right.
you have some strengths and weaknesses and you do have variability. It's the variability we're looking at. So
Yeah.
someone who gets all the same scores tells me they see themselves as pretty solid here. And
Yeah.
they're, you know, if they're in the negative numbers, which you can do, then, you know, they're seeing them negatively across the board. But like 2s and 3s, that's pretty similar. So it doesn't necessarily say you had an area of weakness. What
Right.
is your 2s are a little weaker than your 3s, but that's
And I forget now, was this a scale of 1 to 10? I don't even remember.
it.
What to for-
Actually, well, there's 4 things, but I think on the rating scale it goes. There are, like, if you always do the negative one, I think you used to be. I'll have to check it because
Yeah.
I think that it used to go from a negative to a positive and up higher.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's an algorithm, so you only have 4 choices. But
Right.
after this, I'm going to go run it with all the positives and all the negatives, and I'll let you know.
Okay. Because the one thing I did get a 4 on, I looked at it and I said, well, that's kind of silly because I got organizing materials was the 4. I'm assuming that's the highest score I got was a 4. That's good. The ability to organize objects in work, play, and storage areas. If you looked at my desk right now, you'd say, are
Well,
you
you
kidding
got to
me?
remember that there's really no good and no bad.
Okay.
And on the website, I actually looked it up. The scale is from -5 to 10.
From -5 to +10?
Yes. I don't know
Okay.
how that works, but some mathematician did that for us.
Yeah.
So if you did everything negative in the category, you would have
Mhm.
a number. If you did everything positive in a category, it would say you would have a 10. So if I went and did all the weak ones, I would have all negatives. And if I
Right.
did all the positives, I would have a 10. So, but remember, it's a self scale too. So
Yeah.
it is, that's the important part, is how it's a self-awareness tool for you and for your students. And that's the critical starting point there, is the number's not as important as how you feel about the number and how you think it goes with you. Because I've had kids come up with all 10s and they're a mess. Well, you know,
Mhm.
they did. So, you know, the reality is only as good as the person that took the test and
Right.
for themselves. So that's, you've got to realize it's a self-reflection. It's not a standardized score.
Right.
So
Mm.
that it always, that's why I try to be so clear on this quiz, because we have had professors and people that want to do it, and I need to keep saying, this is not a standardized score. You can't just push them all together and come
Right.
up with a norm, because that's not going to work. There is no norm on these.
Yeah.
So I just really want to make that clear when people are interpreting the quiz, especially when you're doing it with a classroom or a client.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you're still the expert. This is just to start off, to get information and start a conversation and get a picture.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for being here, and keep us posted about what you notice. And we'd love to hear more.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye.
Thanks, pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.